Now is Congressman Schiff. He's the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. You have some important allegations to discuss with respect to the Russia investigation, but let me get your take on this big news this morning. Where do you see the crisis point between the United States and North Korea?
Well, I think the best thing for the United States to do is not engage in Twitter diplomacy, but to have a heart-to-heart with China about the need to really crack down on trade with North Korea. I think it's the most profound leverage that can be applied. But we have to do that in a reasoned way with China. I don't think I'm really talking about China being embarrassed or engaging in bellicose statements about China or distancing ourselves from our South Korean ally is really helpful right now. We should be working to fashion an international coalition to strengthen the economic pressure on North Korea and have something to propose that this would lead to in terms of a diplomatic outcome. I don't see a coherent strategy coming from the administration, and given the stakes are so high, obviously that's alarming for me and I think for many members of Congress in both parties.
Well, we know the president's speaking with President Xi of China this morning. We also know that China has been reluctant, for many years now to do more. There's a lot of money tied up with North Korea. There's a shared border with North Korea for China. So their recalcitrance seems pretty set in. What do you think could be done to motivate them?
Well, look, I think if we sat down with the Chinese at the highest levels and said, we would like to work with you to get North Korea to freeze their program and ultimately roll it back. And here's what we propose. We're going to have to increase the economic pressure, which means you need to cut down on the commerce that you're doing with North Korea. We are going to have to expand our missile defense in the region, our naval presence in the region, secondary sanctions, a lot of things we don't want to have to do if we can't get your full cooperation. But if we can get your cooperation, here's what we're prepared to do. Ultimately, we're prepared to sit down at the table and negotiate a resolution of this with North Korea. But something has to be offered to the Chinese to induce them. We can't confront them in a way that forces them to resist us. And we certainly shouldn't be driving wedges between ourselves and our South Korean allies, which the president is doing for quite inexplicable reasons.
Do you think we're close to any type of military conflict with North Korea?
I think the only way we'd be close to that is if there's a terrible miscalculation by North Korea. And the dangerous rhetoric from the president isn't helping matters when you have such an erratic hothead in Pyongyang. So I would hope that we're nowhere near that. But of course, there are many instances in history where people make terrible miscalculations and that leads them into conflict. Here, that would be absolutely calamitous. So we ought to be doing everything we can to have a sober resolution of this as part of a coherent strategy and not, each member of the administration sort of speaking for themselves. Nikki Haley saying one thing and Secretary Mattis another and the president a third. That doesn't impress anyone, and it doesn't get the job done.
All right, so let's turn to the Russia investigation. What have you seen going on that concerns you?
Well, what concerns me is we've had a practice in the committee where we seek voluntary compliance from witnesses or agencies, and only if they refuse do we issue a subpoena. The majority has now departed from that twice, most recently during the recess. Without sending letters to the FBI or DOJ to request information, it decided it was going to, on its own and unilaterally, issue subpoenas and essentially provoke a confrontation with the Department of Justice and the FBI in a way that I don't think is constructive or helpful and quite unnecessary because the FBI and DOJ have been cooperating with us. So it concerns me. It also concerns me that subpoenas that we do need, where we haven't gotten cooperation, we haven't been able the majority to approve. And the best example is we sent 2 letters to the White House asking if they had anything memorializing, memorializing, that is, conversations between the president and Comey. The White House gave us an incomplete answer. Clearly there are now, and it's come to the public record, that we should subpoena because the White House has been strong-arming us, and those have not yet gone out.
But how would these efforts be undermining the investigation? Maybe it's too aggressive, maybe it's ruffling feathers, but how does that undermine the effectiveness?
Well, I think they're designed to discredit Christopher Steele, but also to discredit the FBI and Department of Justice investigation of Russia's involvement and any connections between Russia
How so?
and the Trump campaign. Well, because when you look at what they're requesting and why this is a priority and why they're not seeking voluntary means but making a very public confrontation with the department, I think it's an effort to put the Department of Justice and the FBI on trial for some reason rather than try to get to the facts.
So you think that there are members of the committee that are trying to create conflict with the FBI so they can say, see, they don't want to talk to us about the dossier. They know it's all bunk.
You know, Chris, I don't know, because the resort to subpoenas is otherwise inexplicable. Why not seek voluntarily compliance? Why not write to the department as we have with other witnesses? Why not seek to get their support without resorting to subpoenas or threats to haul the Attorney General in before the committee? It's a departure from the committee practice, and of course you have to ask why. It doesn't get us any further in terms of understanding what Russia did or what the role of Trump campaign people was. So it certainly seems to be inconsistent with the focus of the investigation at a minimum.
All right, and what do you make of the suggestion that there are conflicts between the congressional investigation and the special prosecutor, in this case, special counsel Bob Mueller?
Well, we have tried to coordinate with Bob Mueller's office, and I think that it's important that we not take steps in our committee that would foreclose Mueller's ability to be able to prosecute individuals. There is timing in terms of sequencing of witnesses that I think we ought to try to take into consideration, the wants and needs of the special counsel. This subpoena does concern me if it goes to material that is being gathered by the special counsel, and if it at least has the potential of disrupting his work. So we are trying to coordinate, but again, this move does concern me if it would in any way impede what the special counsel is doing.